Hey everybody, welcome to Kick Punched. This is my first voiceover, so let's see how awkward we can make this. Anyways, so this is a 3D print that I've had laying around for a while and haven't really done anything with it. So today I've decided we're going to stick this in a fun little diorama where it's blasting a tank. So if that interests you, please like, comment, subscribe, and we will dive into this. Very first, I wanted to show off that the prop does spin, kind of. And one of the issues you run into with clear resin from almost any manufacturer is that it comes out a little bit hazy. So one of the things I was going to attempt to do was spray it with like a clear polymer to see if that would clear that up. And so the stuff I came up with was literally the first can that I grabbed from my garage. And that's what we're using today. It's just the polyurethane clear, high gloss. Gave it a little spray and let it sit for a while, and that's the difference between the two. So I think it worked pretty well. Next step was just kind of going through and sanding down all the little contact points from the supports. Just cleaning this guy up a little bit. This is where having a wife who's a nail technician comes in handy, because you get to steal all her little sanding pads. I was real lucky and happened to find a bit that was the same diameter as the wire I was going to mount this guy with, which almost never happens. Next was just installing the rod so we can stand our plane easily for painting. And I wanted to show you my printer. I used both the Saturn S and the Saturn II from Elegoo. And this is pulling our tank out of his alcohol bubble bath. I usually only let it sit in the alcohol for 10 to 15 minutes or so before he starts to get all wrinkly. I grossly underestimated how tough this resin was. This is the fast resin from Soraya Tech, I believe it was. Ah yes, this was the part where I gave in and finally used the proper tool. Ah, so satisfying. I like to take everything through a hollow process in Zbrush just to make sure that we're not printing solid in resin, because there's no point to that. Resin doesn't grow on trees, or does it? So this is the actual model that I found on Thingiverse. It's just a free download. You'll notice that proportionally mine's different because I actually did take it into Zbrush and scaled everything in like Y and kind of squashed things around and just stylized it, tunified it a little bit. And then just dove in with the snake hook brush and pulled the metal around and kind of made it look like it was damaged. This was the fun stuff. Use the /3 brush to do all those little scratch marks and slashes. I didn't get too crazy with this. A lot of this is going to be subdued and there's some like rough black paint. A lot of these details aren't going to pop. I really liked how the rivets popped out though. I mean, look at those rivets. I'm always a sucker for a good rivet. I don't know about you. and they're definitely going to show up in the print. And that's one thing you want to keep in mind when you print at scale. Are these details going to pop? Again, if you don't want to go through the hassle of learning ZBrush, it's kind of a robust beast, then you can just download these 3D print ready files, and you can click the link in the description below and it'll take you where you need to go, and you can just download these and send them off to a printer or hire it out to your nerdy cousin who has his own. So this is the finished turnaround. This is how things turned out after the print. Still have some alcohol on there, but it turned out really well. I did very quickly want to show you the resin type I use. This is the Fast Gray from Tech. This is also a tough resin. And this is the G217 Clear from Resi1. I use that for the cockpit glass. Wanted to take a brief moment to realize how old my hands look now. And there's the solution. I decided to use this enamel. I guess it's a lacquer-based paint from Testers, so we'll see how that works. And I'm going to be spraying with my HPCH Iwata Eclipse airbrush handle. It's getting old and it's starting to cause problems, but we'll see how it does. I started to get a little bit nervous because there's not an insane amount of pigment in the silver, so it was still looking like the subsurface scattering, the translucency, and the resin was coming through. So I just figured I had to take a few coats at it, and this is kind of the result of 2 coats. My airbrush was spattering a lot, so there's a lot of kind of interesting noise along the surface there that we might have to sand down after the fact. Regardless, we continued with this paint and strategy, and this is kind of the finished results of the metallic on those. The idea here is that we can now run a water-based paint along the surface of these and kind of introduce some wear along the edges of the metal. Moving into painting our tank, so we're using model color acrylic airbrush paint for this, and my airbrush wasn't functioning, so I decided to water it down and brush it on. And this is reflecting, kind of trying a wash, so basically waiting till my base coat is completely dry and then getting a nice runny darker value and just trying to brush that into the details. Just moving along the surface and just trying to get, as a 3D artist would say, kind of an ambient occlusion vibe, and then adding some of that black soot from the blast on the hole on the side. And then I went around all of the peaks and just hit that with a brighter value green to try and make those pop a little bit better. So the attempt here was to just be able to run my finger along the surface and just wear off the acrylic along the edges, and it didn't work very well. That Model Master paint is really sticky, good, hardcore stuff. So I ended up trying to sand it and using my wife's nail file and just trying to sand it down, and it worked a little bit. You can see the metal kind of popping through the green color, but it just didn't work very well. So instead, what I ended up doing was using these interesting paint markers that I found on Amazon, and they're pretty cool. It's like, it has a little rattle, like a ball in it, like it's a rattle can. And so you shake it up and then you just start to paint with this marker. And obviously this is a little bit too intense, so I did end up kind of going over this stuff and just subduing it a little bit, but it does add some very interesting kind of edge wear. We got there. Going around and experimenting with kind of adding the edge wear too in the blast zone. I think that helps those to kind of stand out a little bit more. Mostly just trying to hit the rivets. So at this point I'm diving back into my OD green and just going over those edges, making them not so bright. Let me know in the comments if this is the kind of videos you'd like to see, and if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe and like, ding that bell for me, if you'd be so kind. Here is a turnaround of the progress so far. I'm probably going to be noodling with this all along the way until it's completed, as I am a typical tortured artist and just am never content with my work. So now we're diving into the Corsair paint job. So it's a miracle, but I actually did get my airbrush to work for this particular iteration. So I'm just using that same Model Master brand of paint in a sky blue, and I've intentionally gone with a lighter value because I knew that I was going to darken that value and do a wash to get the details to really pop, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. Okay, so just showing what the wash looks like. This is just, again, just a darker value and seeing how many times I can bump the camera properly. But this is a darker value in that same brand of paint, the Model Master paint, that's just been super watered down. And then I'm just flooding the brush with that and just going over the entire surface and just hoping to high heaven that it will bleed into those details that I worked so hard on in Zbrush. So it takes some, some noodling with, for sure. Just brushing along, and might have to get a little handsy with it and brush some of it off and get a paper towel and go over the peaks of the surface to try and get those to wash out. But overall, I think that it's working pretty nicely. So this is a good example of what's called dry brushing. And so I basically have taken a much brighter value of the paint. Actually, I think this was just the original color that I had sprayed it with, and then dabbed my brush in it and then brushed like a paper towel to get all of the excess paint off. And then this is the result of what's left on the brush. So there's very, very little paint left on a brush that has been dried out. So there's no water in the brush. And then you're just kind of at a very specific angle, just going over the peaks of the model to try and get that lighter value to collect on those. This for me is the hard part. It takes a lot of iterating, a lot of working through, making sure that you don't have too much paint on your brush or you're gonna hose yourself. But everything's fixable. It's like in life, almost everything's fixable except murder. That's not super fixable. One thing of note when you're doing your dry brushing is it's critical that your base model is dry. The paint is as dry as possible. So definitely step away for a while, let that set up, and then this reflects me finding an even brighter value. You can, if you think back to what it looked like initially, it was a very, very bright blue, but with all these values on it, it's darkened up quite a bit. So I'm just kind of trying to bring some of that brightness back. And now going under the bottom side, under the belly, and painting in the white values. Now just attempting to do a wash in the engine and propeller area, so just trying to get the darks to collect in the details. Welcome back to another episode of Tyson Sucks at Airbrushing. In this episode, I try to add some exhaust, some like black smoke that comes out from the engine compartment there. And man, my paint was I was using Tester's black and it was spattering so terribly. So then I spent a good 20 to 30 minutes just trying to clean up that mess. And mostly by dragging my giant man thumbs along the surface and trying to brush it out. In hindsight, I probably would have waited until after I had done my final clear coat on the model as a whole, and then I would have just used like a flat matte black to run that, because it's supposed to be like a soot that's kind of coming out of the engine compartment, and right now it's a high gloss, it's not really working. So just diving into the pilot detailing here, and just painting the mask and getting all the bits in. I'm trying not to be too precious about it because this is absolutely super tiny. And also the cockpit glass is not like crystal clear enough to really draw attention to this, so I kind of just did my absolute darndest. Sometimes it's really tricky trying to get the shot, and this thing is actually super tiny. You're seeing more of my cuticles than the actual 3D print. But we did our best and tried to reach the tiny little places that no one's ever going to see. So this is what it looks like with the cockpit glass on. And now just using our paint marker that we bought on the Amazon to bring back some of the peaks of the silver. Just adding some more edge wear to the engine compartment area, and then doing a subtle wash to try to make some of those details pop a little bit better. As you can see here, the glass isn't quite clear enough to get any of that hard work, but I mean, we're getting the basic colors and I think things are working okay. Just going down the underside of the plane, painting in the white values. Do you ever have a paint that is just the worst paint on planet Earth, just absolutely terrible, but for whatever reason you keep it around and you keep using it project to project? Well, that's what this white paint is. It's just super chunky and nasty, and it doesn't cover anything, and I just never tend to get rid of it. I think it might haunt me when I die. So I'm going bolder than usual in this particular scenario. I saw a picture of a Corsair with a yellow nose, and I thought that was real cool looking. So I figured, you know what, let's get away from this boring silver and add some color to this guy. And I still don't know if I like it. I think it's fun with the stylization of the plane to add those brighter colors. So maybe it'll fly. painting our mounting rod black, just trying to obscure that guy a little bit. So some materials for the base. I'm going to use a polymer clay called Sculpting 3 to sculpt in and kind of bulk up some of the dirt underneath the tank. And I really like this clay. It's really workable. It doesn't smell or anything, or doesn't get messy, get all over in your fingernails and stuff. And then when you're done with the shape, you can actually just cook the clay. So it'll go hard after you've cooked it, so it doesn't air dry. Right here I'm just wiping some really dirty, nasty IPA over just to get rid of my fingerprints and kind of clean up the model a little bit. And this is a secret that I've learned over the years, that you can just use a heat gun to actually get the polymer clay to set, as opposed to throwing it in an oven. I was worried about what the base would do. I did kind of melt the mat underneath. You can see it bubbling up and down underneath the base. But it worked fine. I just held it a good distance away and just kind of let it sit on the clay for a while, and it definitely hardened. So it's kind of a worst case scenario. Probably best to just bake it like the instructions say. And then I had to re-drill my hole for the mounting rod for the Corsair. And you're welcome for my absolutely beautiful framing. I decided I hated that the rod for the Corsair was a little bit offset. And we're going to change that a little bit later. This is some more stuff that I stole from my wife. I love stealing from my wife. This is called Mod Podge, and it's basically like Elmer's glue. Only it goes on a little bit more clear, and I've never used it before, so this is my first time. And I definitely went too light on it, as you'll see here in a little bit. I found some dirt and some vegetation from Hobby Lobby, and yes, I actually bought dirt, if you can believe it. Ridiculous. And so this is me just kind of dumping the dirt onto the Mod Podge, but found that the Mod Podge wasn't thick enough and also started to set up, so it wasn't sticking properly, so I just had to bulk that up a little bit and just get real juicy with it. I'm sorry I said that. I'm actually fairly happy with this purchase. I'm going to justify it because this dirt was easy to work with. It wasn't like a traditional dirt. It's more like these little teeny tiny grains, and they look really nice when they pop out. When they stick to the glue, and they kind of have a nice, super rough kind of texture. So just touching up the little areas that I missed, and it's starting to get much better coverage. After placing the tank, I noticed that the color on the tread for the mud on its tread was definitely quite a bit different than the dirt color, and that was throwing me off, so I decided to actually paint the dirt for better or worse. So I think it went on scary because it looks all obviously wet and kind of nasty, and you're not getting that kind of translucency in the pebbles, but I think once it dries, it turns out a lot better. So just adding the charring effect, and again, this is all just water-based paint. I used thick model glue that I got from Hobby Lobby as well to start to glue on the bushes, the vegetation. Vegetation's really cool. It's just a foam basically, so it's not gonna dry up and get all cracky and stuff and fall off. It's just gonna pretty much maintain its shape. I also picked up the vegetation at Hobby Lobby, just FYI. And this is, you can find this stuff anywhere, and they have little trees and bushes and grass and all kinds of things that you can buy over there. Next, I'm just going over the ridges again with that black, and ideally I would have waited for everything to set up and dry, but I'm a super impatient turd, so I decided to go for it anyway. So just trying to get that charring effect a little bit better around the edges and around the inside of the crater. And then the bushes were fighting me. I found that I actually had to use quite a bit of glue to get those to sit tight. So now the fun part, just adding some rocks that I found out in the yard, and I was really nitpicky. I just really searched through those rocks, just analyzing each individual one, and there was not a few. It was a wild ride. Just a heads up too that I learned that Mod Podge does set up pretty clear. It's not as white as it looks right here when it's wet. And this is the part where I decided to kind of center the rod of the plane in the base, because I was just hating that it was a little bit offset. And then kind of doing just some finishing touches along the rim of the base, just cleaning that up a little bit as I had I tend to get a little messy with my paint work because I'm very impatient with it. I'm actually not a huge fan of painting. It kind of drives me crazy. But I'm always glad that I do it in the end. So this was the scariest part on planet Earth. I was trying to find decals that fit the scale of my model, and I couldn't find them anywhere. And so my solution was use my super crappy airbrush and just kind of paint a circle on the side of this guy, and it got real spattery, as you can see. I'm open to any suggestions in the comments below what I can do to make this thing sing. I might have to just clean it better, I don't know. But the circles turned out okay, even though the paint inside was pretty rough. And then it was just a matter of hand painting stars on the insides of those circles like a chump. It was a mess. And since I was a kid, I've never been good at doing stars. Never once have I ever made a good star. So feel free to judge me. It's your prerogative. But just know that I know, okay, that I'm terrible at stars. So after noodling with stars for what seemed like days, weeks, months, years maybe, I decided to be real bold and just do a quick wash over some of the surface of the panels, because I felt like some of those details just weren't popping out as much as I wanted them to. So in this situation, I wanted them to really kind of try to collect in the riveting and in the in kind of the rib area. I wanted to be able to see the frame underneath, and I think it helped out. Wanted to show you the varnish I'll be using. It's an acrylic resin, as it states, and it's a matte finish because I'm not a huge fan of like super high gloss clear coats. I don't want it to look wet, just want it to have some kind of specularity to the surface. After applying the clear coat, I then applied these little rubber doorstop things. They're for cabinets. You can find those at your local Home Depot. And after sticking those guys on, it's time for the beauty shots. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and ring that bell, and you'll get notified when I come up with more of these little gems. Anyway, thanks again, and we'll see you all in the next video.